Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'm here representing my team who worked with Friends of Rockaway under the guidance of Professor Callahan. And I'm going to walk you through, before I introduce you to our client, a brief overview of the Rockaways, then introduce you to Friends of Rockaway and the work they do, and the work we did over the course of the semester in developing our community engagement toolkit, and the methodology by which we did that, and the different components of the toolkit, and then end with some concluding remarks. The Rockaway Peninsula, often called the Rockaways, is comprised of 12 communities in the southeast corner of New York City with beaches on the Atlantic Ocean. Here you can see the Rockaways on the bottom of this image in relation to the rest of the city to the north, with Manhattan in the upper central part of the image. The peninsula's natural features make it susceptible to flooding. It's flat, it's low-lying, and it's surrounded by water. So with rising temperatures and rising sea level, it's expected to be even more vulnerable to extreme weather events. In order to understand the area we'd be working in, we examined the historical, ecological, and demographic profile of the Rockaways. Our GIS team used that data to create maps like this, which shows population by community and public services. As you can see, Far Rockaway on the right has the highest population, represented by the darker colors. It's important to note that historically the Rockaways were resort communities, so there were few year-round residents, and so therefore the barrier island effect, the peninsula acted as a barrier island for the city against storm surges. As the peninsula is developed, though, the remote location has contributed to its lack of access to city resources, its low economic activity, and relative isolation from the rest of the city. In October 2012, Hurricane Sandy struck New York, wreaking havoc in the area. For several days, residents battled enormous storm surges and raging fires that swept away many homes. In this map, with low to medium inundation in green and yellow, and up to 17-foot storm surge shown in red, you can see that almost the entire peninsula was inundated with storm surge. Only the beige areas towards the right were accepted. Due to its remote location, the New York Fire Department and other emergency services were unable to reach the Rockaways. Economic and social development there was limited, and this impacted their ability to recover. Out of this was born Friends of Rockaway, a nonprofit organization focused on helping people rebuilding and repairing their homes. A key component of their work is connecting victims with financial resources and government services that were set up to provide assistance post-Sandy. As their work progressed, Friends of Rockaway realized they needed to start looking at long-term recovery for the peninsula, beyond just getting people back in their homes. They asked us to help them define what long-term recovery might look like, with a focus on providing recommendations for resilience and development. We were asked to develop a community engagement toolkit so that they could use it to involve the communities in the recovery process. GIS maps like the two I just showed you were of particular importance because Friends of Rockaway could use them to explain how the area would be impacted by climate change. So the first step in our methodology was a literature review where we examined case studies from around the US of cities that had been impacted by storms and were working to enhance their resilience. We also considered various community engagement frameworks for the Rockaways, and we knew that our toolkit would only be successful if we knew what the communities there wanted. So we attended community meetings and we conducted interviews with community leaders. This outreach allowed us to gauge attitudes towards climate change and what communities wanted out of a resilience plan. This data formed the basis for our GIS maps, which was the key component to our toolkit. Our research, conducted online and on the ground, allowed us to develop strategy recommendations, the first of which is a defined target of 2050 for a long-term resilience plan. We noted that definitions of long-term varied from city to state and NGOs. Some said 2020 was long-term. And we suggest defining it as 2050 because it's more fathomable to people than 2100, as it's falling within the lifetime of many people alive today. But it's also more realistic than 2020 in terms of enacting policy and securing funding for projects. Our time at the community meeting showed us that there was no centralized system for rehabilitation requests, so we also suggest setting up a central information hub which could be a new organization or just a website that compiles funding sources and agendas and priorities for the community. To implement these strategies, which also includes a community engagement framework, which I'll explain in a minute, we've developed a suite of tools that includes a set of GIS maps, which Friends of Rockaway can tailor to neighborhood needs. So for example, if they're at a meeting in far Rockaway, they can zoom into that area and discuss the various factors that determine its resilience and conversely its vulnerability. Also included is a set of presentations Friends of Rockaway can use to educate communities about climate change. Lastly, in the toolkit is a survey for engaging with community members and the results of our interviews with community leaders. Friends of Rockaway can use the toolkit to engage communities to develop the long-term resilience plan. Resilience is defined as reducing the vulnerability of the ecological, infrastructural, and economic systems of the communities. Even absent climate change and rising sea level, it's clear that the peninsula has undergone drastic changes over time. This map shows from USGS the shoreline of the Rockaways in 1866, shown in black on the right, and how it's moved westward over time, with the next darkest shade to the left in 1910, and then so on until the 1970s. With the use of groins and jetties, we have the current shape of the Rockaway Peninsula. This map is part of our toolkit for engaging with communities and shows natural changes due to ocean waves and shifting sand, and emphasizes the need for a long-term plan. The framework we thought was relevant to developing the plan is called Civic Ecology, an approach to community engagement developed by sustainability expert Tim Smith. One of the biggest hurdles to the recovery efforts so far is a lack of social cohesion among the 12 communities on the peninsula. And this framework defines resilience as made up of two factors. First, hardware, probably what we're all familiar with, which is the physical infrastructure of a place, like bridges and roads and buildings. But software is where we recommend Friends of Rockaway refocus some of their efforts. And this involves building trust, building social cohesion, supporting sustainable economic development, and this is ultimately what's known as social capital, where people are civically engaged with each other and the environment in a way that builds trust and knowledge and economic stability over time. This stability makes the community more resilient, which in turn fosters more robust civic engagement. And at the community meetings, it was apparent that social capital was lacking. The quantitative side to social capital we found in the Social Vulnerability Index, data compiled by the University of South Carolina. The index combines a set of over 40 different factors that influence the development of a community and uses these to determine the vulnerability of that community to environmental hazards. Such factors include poverty level, number of immigrants, and other demographics. So we use the data to create this map, which shows each census tract and its vulnerability. Friends of Rockaway can use this data to evaluate the peninsula's communities according to the index and tailor-make resilience plans in the communities. Another example of the GIS map suite shows sea level rise and EPA monitored sites. Friends of Rockaway did not previously have any such maps to engage the communities. So we provided them maps such as this, which allow them to involve the community in the resilience planning and connect with them by identifying sites in their communities. Facts and figures, we all know, can be pretty abstract. The feedback, they can also, the Friends of Rockaway can also use this kind of map to engage the community to improve the information herein. It keeps community members committed, gives them ownership over the recovery plans, and helps build trust between community leaders, NGOs, and residents. At the same time that our internal teams were making maps and learning about civic engagement, our outreach team was developing a survey to engage community members and gauge their perceptions of climate change. We provided Friends of Rockaway with the survey for future use while we began interviewing community leaders. From them, we learned that climate change was a concern among all of them. They were aware that Sandy would not be the last major storm to threaten the peninsula. And a positive factor was that each leader felt that Sandy posed opportunities in the communities. In one interview, Jamie Jordan, co-founder of Rockaway Help, noted, quote, "There's an opportunity here to turn local students into climate change warriors." This reiterated to us the importance of community education and engagement. So in conclusion, Friends of Rockaway asked us to define long-term recovery and resilience for the peninsula's communities. We've recommended long-term planning extend to 2050, the establishment of a comprehensive central hub to provide a set of goals and priorities for the communities. And in long-term resilience planning, the Rockaways can clearly benefit from a renewed focus on social capital building and community engagement. To implement these strategies, Friends of Rockaway can use the community toolkit we've provided to enable productive community engagement and collaborative planning and research in order to build a more robust and resilient Rockaways. Thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Robbie. Great job.
Thanks.
Question for you. Is there sort of an organized effort amongst communities along the eastern seaboard, either in the tri-state area, for example, communities in New Jersey, or extending down to the Carolinas, to tackle these issues together? It seems like there are a lot of opportunities to share best practices, whether that's building barriers or dealing with municipal infrastructure. I'm just curious whether they work together either at the prodding of EPA or FEMA, or whether they've started to sort of band together on their own.
I don't think that there's a concerted effort among the communities. Maybe my team members know of one in particular, but it seems like now that's the kind of thing that's starting to happen, where New Jersey has a really good website with all kinds of great information on it that talks about all the different coastal communities in New Jersey. But I don't think something that encompasses the entire eastern seaboard has been undertaken, but that's a great idea.
Other questions? Our routine question.
Given the vulnerability of the area, was there any discussion that relocation might be better than redevelopment?
Well, we've certainly thought about that. That's come up. It's really not, in the short term, an option for the communities. They feel really rooted in their community, which is, I think a lot of people can relate to that. But probably long term, that's something that we might have to think of. But in the meantime, while they're going to stick it out, they need strategies for, riding the waves, riding the storms.
Time for one more, if there is one. Okay, thank you.
Okay.